So I'm working on procedural terrain right now, and I'm kind of shocked that this is it. I mean, I need a procedural world that stores seeds and biome sizes and chunk sizes, and can generate a chunk. And I need a chunk that can generate a chunk, and that's it. Um, I'm gonna need something to convert it into a mesh and all that, but I think that's all gonna be done under chunk, and chunk's just gonna be like its own seed or not seed, but scene, or it might just be as simple as using um, I'll probably both use a seed and a class name for it, but it's relatively simple stuff. In terms of architecture, in terms of the actual execution of the code, is going to be kind of difficult. But I mean, obviously, I'm going to have other things like saving a chunk and loading a chunk. But I'm going to implement that in the save and load system, which I'm doing next after this one. So I'm not going to worry about that yet. I'm just going to worry about generation. And yeah, I mean, this is really all there is to it. I mean, there's going to be a lot more in the code, but architecture wise, this is it. So I'm going to try to implement this as best as I can, knowing absolutely nothing about what I'm doing, and we'll see how far I get. I'll see you in a bit.
So I've been doing some work. It's actually been a little while since the last clip. Um, I've worked on this for probably 3 or 4 hours, and I'm pretty happy with how the generation works right now. It is laggy because I'm running OBS in the background, so I can show you guys this. But um, it's got the tree is not bad. I made a simple shader for it. Um, but in terms of how the terrain actually um, feels, I think this is where I want it. It's very mountainous, but then you can also find, uh, you know, uh, plains type biomes like this over here, or I mean, we can keep going down. So this is more of a valley, and then we also have, obviously the big mountains too. Um, so I think in terms of the actual terrain itself, this is where I want that to be. Um, I have to work on turning a chunk into um, a piece of probably a dictionary is what I'll use, but some kind of data about it that I can then load again without having to generate the terrain again. So I have to do that. And then I have to make a system for spawning in trees and that kind of thing on top of the um on top of the terrain. So right now it's just the ground, but we need trees and foliage and that kind of thing. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's not perfect terrain. I think I will come back and tweak it at some point, but for right now, I'm pretty happy with it. And I'll walk you through what's going on. Um, just because I think it's really cool. Um, in case you guys are doing this, so this is just all the values that you would want to change. This is the actual generation. The rest of this is just specific to my game, not really worrying about terrain, but like, for example, humidity and temperature. So everything comes from simulate. Simulate basically just sets the whole thing up, and we're calling simulate on the ready function. But this is just the reason I'm doing this instead of just doing it manually is because uh, if you are generating a new world, then you'd be able to call simulate differently. If you're loading a world, you'd be able to call simulate differently. There's all kinds of things like that that it just needs to be this way. And then we have um, under physics process, basically we are just uh, this is looping through simulation distance basically and figuring out which chunks should be loaded. And then this is um, basically just figuring out if we need to activate a chunk or deactivate a chunk. Right now for deactivating, I'm literally just making it invisible to up with frame rates, but it's not actually doing anything. It's still there, so I need to fix that. Um, and with activate chunk, it's just generating it or turning it back to visible if it's already been generated. So it's not terrible. It certainly works. And right now my chunk size um, is very small just to help with loading and unloading it because I don't have a background thread right now. I'm doing it all in the in main, which is not ideal. And I am going to fix that eventually. But right now, my chunk size is set to 8 because I don't want to deal with that right now. And it's not perfect, uh, but it's It's not bad for a first pass. This is the shader. It's pretty simple. The tricky part was figuring out how to blend between three values, which I finally figured out. And now that I see the solution, I am kicking myself in the forehead. But yeah, it's a simple shader, but it was the first shader that I've made because I haven't had an excuse to make one until now. Um, so I mean, I'll run it again, but it's good terrain. We need foliage, we need rocks, we need trees, and until I'm still waiting on those assets, but until I get them, I need to work on systems for um, how are we loading them and how are we unloading them, other than just turning them invisible. I need to save them to a dictionary and load them from a dictionary and that kind of thing. So uh, I'm going to work on that for a little bit, and we will see where that gets me. So I've been working on it some more. Um, I've changed how the terrain generation works itself, but then also I've made a system that just kind of puts in placeholders right now, just as a proof of concept to say that I can instance something at the right position on a chunk. So, um, I mean, yeah, this is the terrain right now. It's not where I want it to be, but it's not bad either. Um, the the red things are just placeholders, but they do mean that I can instance, a tree here or whatever like that, and it will take the right y value. So that's where we are right now. Um, I'll show you the code real quick. Um, because I realized I hadn't shown you the actual generation guts. Um, so basically, we have a function that shifts the vertex by whatever amount we need to shift it by, and then we have a generation system. So this is basically creating a plain mesh just to start off of that's subdivided, so we have the right number of points. Um, this is creating, setting up our tools, getting them ready, and then this is figuring out where the new vertex needs to be. This is calculating how steep the average face is, how sheer it is. Um, this is removing the original points because we replaced them with our new points, and then we're just basically applying changes, and that's it. This is just here for the shader, and this is this testing. This is what's responsible for those little red sticks poking out of the ground. And I mean, it works. It's by no means the best, but it's getting there. This is certainly a lot better than when I showed it to you guys last, so we're certainly getting there. I like it. I'm not super happy with it yet, but not too bad. And we're definitely moving in the right direction. So I'm going to keep working on it, and I will see you guys in a little bit. I'm going to try to figure out some architecture stuff, because I think I have a better grasp of the problem now, a better understanding of what I have to do. So I'm going to try to figure out and plan out what I'm going to do to fix some of this and make it work a little bit better. So I'll see you in a bit. Hey everyone, so it's actually the next day from the last clip. The last few features have been really difficult to implement. Um, I've had to work with things like randomly distributing points, um, and this is the final results of it. It's not perfect, but it's as good as it's gonna get. It's as good as I'm willing to make it get right now. And if it becomes an issue later, then I'll deal with it then. But this is laggy because I'm running OBS in the background. But the red poles, which are placeholders for trees, are mostly evenly distributed. I mean, here's one for example. There's a cluster over here. I actually don't mind there being clusters because that's that can be fixed by turning the rarity down. And I figured if something's so common, like if something's this common, it's probably going to be a smaller item anyway, so I'm okay with it being next to each other like this. Like if two pebbles are next to each other like this, that's fine. And obviously if two gigantic oak trees are next to each other like this, that's not fine. But two gigantic oak trees would have a rarity much lower, so it's not going to be as big of a problem. And just so you know what I'm talking about with rarity and such. Everything's controlled from one of these resources. So you have the scenes that it can use, how densely packed it's going to be, the minimum separation, and how rare it is. This is 0.5 rarity. If I wanted to make it more rare, I just change the number up. It's between 0 and 1. And I mean, we can run it again like that and it should be fine. I mean, yeah, now there's a whole lot fewer trees, right? Um, only two. Um, so to balance that out, you can change the density up. So we can change the density to maybe something like 20, and that should be fine. Um, and this should balance that out, so you'll have more trees, but they'll be hopefully not as close to each other. So, I mean, yeah, so obviously, like if we were doing something like a giant oak tree, then we might use something like this, and you see in this example, there aren't any things like right next to each other. So everything's controlled like that, and hopefully in this way, everything will be evenly spaced. Um, I'm just going to change this back to 2 and back to 0.5. Um, the minimum separation has something to do with the algorithm that I'm using. It's called, according to Wikipedia, it's called Poseidon's disk algorithm, which is a fancy way of saying I pick a bunch of points and I see if things are, if any 2 points are too close to each other. And if they are, then I pick a different point within the chunk to distribute them to. Um, and it works well, but the minimum separation is just for that. It is how the minimum distance between two of these objects in a given chunk. If they're on a chunk border, theoretically they could be like right on top of each other. Although I have taken some safeguards against that. It's not 100% there though, and I can work on this again. I can keep working on it if it becomes an issue later. But for right now, it's working and it's working well enough that I'm ready to move on for now. Sheerness, so all of these curves are describing the biome that it's in, basically the biome that it should spawn in. So if the value is below 0.5, it won't spawn there so under those conditions. So if we have a sheerness value of 0, it's got a value of 1, so it will spawn there. But if we have a sheerness value of 1, then it would say that's too steep because 1 is going to be below 0.5. So the curve doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just if it's below 0.5 or not. So for right now, I'm doing, because we only have one testing object, the temperature doesn't play a role in it, the magic doesn't play a role in it, the elevation doesn't play a role in it, none of these things really matter. But, well, the elevation does play a role in it, I'm sorry. But if we wanted to make a tree only spawn in humid zones, maybe we want like a palm tree that also spawns in like swamps or something like that, who knows? Um, then we could change humidity so it has to be near the ocean. So we'll say if the humidity is 0, we'll make it lower, and if the humidity is 1, then it'll spawn over here. So now it's going to spawn only near, humid zones like maybe a beach or something, or a swamp. But that's how we could do that. And right now, just to test this feature, I'm using elevation. So trees will spawn normally all the way up to about 0.65-ish percent elevation, and then it won't spawn. And you can see that in action if I run it again here. Trees won't spawn on the tops of mountains um, once we load in here. So if I fly up and find a mountain, and I think there's going to be one over here maybe. Right, so now you can see there's no trees spawning on the mountain anymore. Um, because the mountain is too high for the trees to spawn on. So that is all functioning properly. And I think I have it where I want it for right now. Also, the train generation itself, I really like. There's mountains, which happens to be where we are now, but there's also plains. I haven't taken some time to explore this seed, so I mean, I don't know what it's going to be, but now we're entering a plains biome. Um, that's a little bit closer to sea level because the grass is turning a little bit more yellow. Um, and I mean, now we're kind of some small hills, but it's still relatively flat. I mean, you can see how this would go in terms of the elevation change. I like it a lot. And once we get more assets than other than red poles, and start specifying their biomes, it's gonna look a lot nicer, a whole lot nicer. We're gonna start having differentiating between biomes and all that. And here we found another mountain, so the trees stop once we get to the peak, and they start to turn white because that is the color of snow, and we're blending between colors and yada yada yada. It works quite beautifully. Um, that is where we are at right now, terrain generation wise. There is one thing that I want to add, and that is water. I really want there to be water, but I simply don't know how I want to do it. I do not know, and that's a problem. But yeah, I don't know quite what we're gonna do next, in terms of for the water. But I'm gonna have to think about that, and I'll get back to you in a bit. Oh, actually, this is the new chunk generation system. It's a lot easier than last time. Again, there's more moving parts to the whole thing, but it's a lot simpler. Everything is using global generation settings now, instead of it passing to a chunk. Um, the it comes from some settings data that you can change on the fly, so it's no longer changing it in code. Um, and it comes from generated item data, which is what I was showing you before. But everything else just communicates nicely, and this is a lot easier to use and to see. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna try to figure out how I'm gonna do water. I don't know how I'm gonna do it yet. And I will see you guys in a bit. So this is the first way of doing things. It's just making a global sea level and then adding a mesh of water at that area. And that's what I'm doing here, and it works. And it works quite well. And there's some things that I like about this, like for example, these kind of pools over here, just because of how the terrain generation works. There's just enough here. Like ideally, this would connect into a river. Um, Even if it's just a tiny one that goes like just to this pool over here. But I don't know how I want to do that. I need to figure out how I want um, water to flow. Because this is good. Like it's a good lake, but I want there to be able to be lakes like up here. Um, like if there's a small indentation in in the terrain, um, just enough to form like a little bowl or something. I want there to be a lake there, um, or at least be able to have a lake there. Um, and I am trying to find an example of that where I would say, yeah, there should be a lake here. Um, but right now there just isn't. It's only spawning at that very particular um, sea level. I mean, here we come again. Um, and it's not like it works, but it's not ideal. I would like for there to be, lakes and rivers and all that. And right now, I mean, the other thing is you get like spots like this where, hey, there's a tiny itty bitty area where the water does show through. Um, and I'm not sure if that's how we want that to work in the end. And I mean, like even up here, like we're walking through a valley, there should be a river right here, um, just where I'm over. Um, and I mean, almost see water poking through there. I mean, it's not, but um, the water's all the way down here. But it's there, and maybe up here we have a lake or something, or there could be a mountain lake. But I mean, you can tell that this area that I'm flying through right now could be a river, um, and maybe this up here is a lake. Um, but I don't know how I'm going to do that yet. Um, so I mean, yeah, right, like right here is a valid spot to have a lake. So maybe I can put in a mesh and then rotate it by its normals or something like that. I don't know. I just don't know. But that's where we are right now. We have water technically working, but it's not ideal. There's improvements that could be made and that I really want to be made. So I'm going to keep working and I will see what I can figure out. Um, but I'm completely clueless at the moment. Hey, so I'm back. I've done some tweaking to the generation system, and I guess I'll just show you what I have at this point. Um, it does it takes it lags a little bit at the beginning, and I need to create a background thread in order to fix that. But for now, it's just gonna have to be a thing. Um, the terrain right now, there's not much has changed. I changed it to the trees don't spawn in the water. They spawn right next to it though, which is fine. And I've decided basically to stick with a water generating like this. It's no longer an extra mesh per chunk. It's just one big mesh that follows the player around now. I thought that was going to be a lot easier, a lot better to do in the long run, performance wise. Um, but it does make everything look a little bit choppy. I mean, you have uh, uh, it just looks like the train ends abruptly, and you can really tell that it's a giant square. Um, I don't like that part of it at all, but it is what we have to deal with for now. I think after we get in the skybox, generating around the player, we kind of bring in some fog and that kind of thing. I think that's at that point it's going to be a lot easier to look at and a lot easier to see. The kind of fog and Skybox will hopefully take care of this square issue. Everything looking like a square, even though technically it is um, very similar to that. But the terrain right now, at least the terrain system, is done. The terrain itself has a long way to go, obviously, in terms of how we implement the system. I would like the world to be a little bit taller, believe it or not. A little bit larger biome size, just a little bit. The trees are we're going to get some actual trees in instead of red poles. And then obviously have to make a sky and a skybox and a day-night cycle and that kind of thing. But those should all be relatively simple. Keyword being relatively. But for now, this is how it is, and I'm not disappointed. I like it. Um, so I've made very minor changes. Just like uh, for example, the chunks are no longer a scene; they're just um, a single um, class that extends the CSG mesh. So, just like some small optimizations there, I changed how the water mesh is generated. And so, at the end of the day, it basically just looks like this. It's not hard. Nothing's too complicated, and it works, which is what matters. So I'm gonna move on. I have to make that background loading system now, or not background loading system even yet, but the just background thread in the first place. Because you can see when I start loading, I get the spinning circle of doom, the pinwheel, and so I would like to fix that. With a background thread system. So that's what we're going to work on next. And hopefully, right now my simulation distance is really small because in terms of how many chunks I'm loading, because um, I can't handle that many of my computers. Not the most powerful thing in the world, but I'm hoping that after I have the background loading system, it might be able to make use of um, more cores or something like that. I don't know what the technical term is, but hopefully I'll be able to make my render distance go up once I have a background thread in the game. I don't know how hard that's going to be. From what I can tell, background threads are quite difficult, especially in Godot. But I'm going to give it a shot, and we'll just see what happens. Um, so that will be in the next video, but for now, I guess that was all I got. So I will see you guys later, and I hope this was helpful.